The art of Fran Skiles is process-driven. It's abstract and without a strict narrative, but seeks to capture the essence of nature. Fran was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, and graduated from West Virginia University with a BA in textile design. Fran is a full-time artist working in Florida and West Virginia, and also teaches and lectures throughout the United States, giving workshops in fabric and paper collage. During the 90s, Fran made art quilts, which were exhibited both nationally and internationally. Her most recent exhibition shows a number of layered abstract acrylic works. The colours are bold, the marks are energetic, with titles such as No Deposit, No Return, Order Imagined, and The Kitchen Sink. The viewer is left wanting to know more. It's the synergy of the parts, the synthesis of the layers that come together to form Fran's signature style. Fran says, "Images feed my soul and my art. It's a spontaneous act with permanent results." Fran's layered artworks certainly have depth, and to me a sense of mystery about what lies behind the strokes and indeed what lies beneath. So let's find out more and say hello to Fran, who joins me, Tara Axford, and you wherever you are, from her home in Florida today. If you are joining us live, please leave a comment and let us know where you are in the world. If you are catching up on a replay, we hope you enjoy the conversation and share it with your friends. So without further ado, let's welcome Fran Skiles, our 58th Friday feature artist. Hello, Fran. Welcome.
Hello, Sarah. Hello.
To our Friday. Now we've got lots of people joining us today. So hello to everyone, and as they come in, we'll welcome everybody aboard. So that's fabulous. So let's get started. So I was reading that cloth was your first medium and that this began in childhood. So I'm curious, what kind of things did you make and how did you start?
I made doll clothes. That was my first introduction to basically wrapping a doll with cloth and tying knots in the back of the doll. So it was pretty crude. When I was in junior high school, I started making clothes. I mean, not anything complicated, mostly skirts, and that's where I started.
That is so funny. That's exactly what I did. And I had these little dolls where you could actually take their heads off. And so first of all I had to do was fold a piece of fabric and cut a hole and put their head back on and then wrap around.
Yeah, really, yes. The garments didn't require sewing. They just required wrapping and knotting. And that's what I did a lot in later years.
Yeah. And while we're riffing on that, I'll just bring up everybody to say hello to you, because you've got lots of fans here joining us. So hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in. So from all areas of the globe here, big fan. Hi Leslie.
Hi Leslie.
Wow. So yes, so many people popping in. It's a bit hard to keep up with the comments and the greetings, but I'll do our best. Okay, so next thing I wanted to ask you, when I think of quilts and exhibitions, I kind of think of all the rules and certain ways of doing things. So I wondered how you came across the art quilt movement, if that's different to the other quilt movement. So how does the art quilt movement differ from what we might think of as traditional quilting?
That is the reason that I got into art quilting, because there were hardly any rules. My craftsmanship is not good or excellent or whatever, and I tend to leave, just like with my doll clothes, knots on the other side. So that truly attracted me to art quilting, because there are no rules. But
Right, yes.
you do have to put a backing on, but it can be a false back, to cover up all the crazy stitching and the knotting and all that stuff. I'm not very rule oriented, so the precision quilting never really
Exactly.
appealed to me.
Yes, all that piecing together, all those tiny little points that have to actually meet at a certain
I,
point.
I can't manage that. I could never have been a draftsman either. That there are certain careers that I'm sort of locked out of. But art quilting is kind of messy.
Right.
Anything goes. It's like a
Mm.
painting.
And so then I also read that you then moved towards the idea of a flexible wall hanging. So what led to the shift towards that, away from quilts themselves?
Well, not only am I messy, but I'm also lazy. And art quilting takes quite a lot of time. I did art quilting for about 10 years, and my maximum outlay was about maybe 5 quilts a year. I wanted to speed things up, and I also wanted to have a product that would sell through an art gallery. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to be in a gallery in Santa Fe, and I came up with the idea of making skins. I called them skins because they still the main component was fabric, but I stiffened the fabric with gesso and with cheesecloth and stretched it, and it became a flexible fabric piece that could be
Right.
treated more like a painting, and it was covered with an acrylic medium. So even though it was still fabric, it was sort of a cross between an art quilt and
Mm.
a painting.
So I read that probably, like a lot of people, that you had a reasonable fabric collection, and collecting
Yes,
fabric was a thing. But then, when did you decide to start adding paint to the fabric? So
that was
what was the
that was
process that?
yes. I was introduced to art quilting by a friend, and I want to mention her name because some people in the art quilt world or a lot of people in the art quilt world would know her. Barbara Watler was her name, and she was a Fort Lauderdale resident. So it was back in the 80s that Barbara said, "Why don't you try art quilting?" And I had never looked at it. I didn't know exactly what it was. It sounded good, and so my first art quilt, and I think you have an image of it. I bought some white cotton duck, and some fluid acrylics, and I just went at it, literally,
Okay.
and cut them apart, and joined together. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's my
Okay.
very first endeavor, and I'm calling that an art quilt.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've also got this one. I don't know how is that. That obviously has got paint on the fabric.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's painted, and my fabric of choice was cotton duck, and there is some netting in there. But yeah, the fabric is painted. It is an art quilt, and it was in Quilt National.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was also reading that the collage materials and papers are often printed and painted, and that you had a technique called immersion bath with water and oil.
Oh
So
dear!
I was
It
thinking,
it
is
sounds
that like marbling?
yes. I'm getting a laugh out of that. I was pretty extravagant with my words. I actually I couldn't think of the proper term, so I just described the process. But I had some success with that, but I do it with paper, not fabric.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so do you have a favorite print technique, or you just kind of mix up a variety depending on what you're aiming for at the time?
Oh gosh, I like them all. I like them all. I've had some really good results with the jelly plate. And
Yes, I was going to
yeah,
ask you about that.
oh, that's delicious. And I just purchased a larger jelly plate, which is, even a bigger wowsy kind of working.
I mean, it is such a great product. It's so easy to use, and just there's so many possibilities. But do you think there's a common mistake that people make when they use a jelly plate for the first time?
Do I think there's a common?
Yeah. Do you think there's sort of something that, I mean, I kind of love working with the golden open paints, but do you
I
have?
do too.
I just wondered if you had a go-to.
It's interesting that we haven't talked, but we both discovered that the golden open is the best for the jelly plate. It's the only one I use because
Yes. And it's hard to sort of be prescriptive when working with it and sort of say to people, well, if you want to avoid being disappointed, just go straight to golden open. But I realize that people have a lot of paints in their stash, and that might not be their go-to. And I just find that often people use a lot, like maybe too much paint, and that's the wonderful thing about the golden, that you don't actually need much for the results. So I just wondered if that was your experience as well.
Yeah, while you were speaking, I was thinking that the first print that I make with a jelly plate with golden open is usually my least favorite. The second and the third is a better one because it's you too. Okay, it's a little more subtle.
Yeah, and that it always seems like the holy grail for jelly printing is the ghost print, so the prints that happen after the first one, the things that get left behind.
Yes.
And that's often when everyone gets excited and you have those little squeals of delight.
I don't have many techniques. I've never read a book about it or taken a class, so I haven't studied it. I just literally play with the idea of a jelly plate, and I don't mix colors. So I don't know what other people do with the jelly plate, to tell you.
And there's certainly a lot of it all over the internet. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to this, I love looking at the idea of abstract as a concept. So do you find working abstract quite freeing? Because I mean, there's a preconception that it's easier than representational art, but do you have any thoughts on working abstractly?
Easier. I suppose it depends on your brain function. I would never even attempt realism. I don't think I would enjoy it. I don't think I would do a good job with it. But my brain is adapted to abstract because I like the surprises. I mean, that's what truly drives me in my artwork is the what if factor. And abstract gives plenty of that, and it's endless. It's truly endless what you can layer and what you can discover.
Yes, and I see that also nature is one of your influences in your work. And how would you describe the process of translating nature? And is it a conscious thing, or does it something that you trust that by being in nature it then come out in your work? Or how do you go about the translation?
Well, I'm double thinking this. Rocks are probably the biggest influence in nature for me. Second to that would be rock formations and trees. But I have a theory that if you feed yourself enough of these images, and I don't mean photographs, I mean actually interacting in nature, that you make an imprint on your own. So that can carry you through. If you are in a closet painting, the rock is going to come out no matter what. I don't know. I don't remember what your question was.
Just about how you translate the nature, how you go about translating it. And
it's imprint. It's imprinted in my brain.
Yeah. So there's a certain trust factor there. And looking at a lot of your pieces, they have these very gestural strokes, and I was wondering, like, how do you get into that zone? What's your advice to people to how to loosen up? I know a lot of people like to hone in on the detail. How do you go about those more gestural movements?
Well, you know, I leave the detail to my my printing process. So I will back up. I try to divide my work into printing on paper and also executing a design. So I don't do this both at the same time. In fact, I think it's necessary to have a pretty large library of printed papers that are abstract. For me, they're abstract shapes, and they could be ink drawings on thin paper, thick paper. You know what I do all of that, or washes, and so that's my stuff. You know, that is available to me to draw into a collage, and when I start a collage, I know I've got it. You know, but I'm not focusing on it because I don't need it yet. My first emphasis is getting marks and casual washes on either a canvas or watercolor paper. And when I need something in detail, I usually pull it out of my boxes where my paint was there.
Okay, so if I look at this particular image here, could you talk to us? So that's made up of various printed papers, or?
Yes. I see on the right the emulsion that I was talking about, and golly, I think this was done, I'm going to say about 10 years ago. I'm trying to remember. And it is all paper.
And I also have this one as well.
Okay, all right. That is there isn't quite so much paper in that one. Although there's washes.
Oh, that's probably more paint in that one.
Correct, and that's more recent. That was done about 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah, it can be quite difficult to unpick how you've created something, and particularly with the jelly printing too. I start by being really conscientious and making notes so that if people ask me later how you achieved that, I can report back. But you get swept up in the process, and soon you've kind of forgotten how you got there, really.
Well, I don't know how it is for you, Tara, but probably 75% of the papers that I print, I never use.
And do you have a method of storing these, or are they just kind of
in plastic?
Do you file them?
No, I don't. But I file them according to size. And a funny thing is, of course, it starts out pretty large because it's on a sheet of paper. And then as I use it, I will tear it. And then I have two boxes that are for the small pieces of paper. I file it by the timeliness of it and when I printed it, or the method that I used, and also the size.
Yeah. Now we do have a question here from Janice. So have you had experience with using the retarder? So I think people use the other golden products and use the retarder instead of the open paint. Have you used that, or do you?
I have not, but that's a great idea. It might act just the same as the golden open. Yes. No, I just haven't used it. I can't comment.
Yeah. And going back to the collage, it can be a bit of a C word. And I was thinking, and I know that you teach workshops, do you think that people find collage difficult, or in your experience, do people generally embrace it when in your presence?
Well, I don't know about my presence. Maybe it's the classroom itself. Yes, but also the people that are attending the class are interested in it. interested in collage. The way I approach it is pretty carefree. I mean, one step follows the other, so there's no pressure to. I don't know if I stress that or not, but the way I work is I have no clue what the end result is going to be, and I think if you are interested in knowing what the end is going to look like, it stifles the process.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what you can say.
Yeah, that idea of trying to plan the final outcome in advance.
That'd be horrible.
And so do you find that you just have to, how do you know when a piece is right or finished? You know, is it a sort of brain thing or a gut thing?
I don't have a magic formula. In fact, I can look back on some of the work that is in progress, and I decide to change it drastically. It might be because of my mood at the time, that I'm looking for something to control. But many times I will destroy it in the process, and I have to bring it back to a good, something that I think would represent me. So
Right, yeah.
I don't have any formula for knowing those kind of things. I don't.
And do you ever think of collage as kind of problem solving?
Yes.
Does that aspect appeal to you? And is problem solving part of your nature, or is it just something that you access when you work on collage?
Only when I work on collage. Of course it is. That's the easy part of collage. I don't know how you work. I'm assuming that you have lots and lots of collage materials at your ready. The way I do, it's so much easier to pull some paper out than to commit yourself to a layer of acrylic wash. That's a done deal.
In my head, in my ideal world, and in my little chest of drawers in my studio, I have gone into sorting by color, and I have my neutrals drawer, my cool drawer, my warm drawer. But every now and then I have to go and cull it and resort, because in that frantic tidy up, you just shove it all in the drawers, and
well, I know,
the order gets lost.
Clean up the mess. And when you can't find something, then it's probably time to clean.
Yeah. And this question comes up often, the glues, working with different layers and also combining different papers. Do you use a certain type of glue or paste or a matte medium? How do you get the layers to sit flat?
I absolutely have my favorite. The PVA is the only one that I use for a glue, polyvinyl adhesive. It's a paper glue, and it's great. It's great.
And do you water that down to dilute the strength for you?
No, I don't water it down.
And do people get concerned about the sort of archival properties, or you kind of feel that the acrylic and plastic will outlast everybody anyway?
I don't care about it. Maybe other people do, but I don't. I don't. And I think PVA is probably archival. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it'll probably outlast us, I would say. Yes.
It doesn't yellow, and it doesn't destroy the hand of the paper. Of course, the lightweight, thin tissue paper has to be handled very, very carefully with the PVA.
Yes.
I mean, there's a technique to do that. Any moisture on lightweight paper is very delicate. Yeah, very delicate.
And so when we were talking about working in layers, and often, I've kind of read this idea that abstract artists who do work in layers, the first layer is often hidden or obscured, and sometimes people like to sort of bury writings and things that mean something to them in that. Do you work that way, deliberately obscuring things?
No, but there is something that happens to me frequently, that when a piece isn't working, so the paper is already on the canvas, or the paper is on the paper, and I cover it up.
Right.
And then perhaps the only thing that is showing at the surface is the density, the edges of the paper that's underneath. Now, I consider that to be a plus. I think the more I call them petticoats, the more petticoats that are on a piece, for me, the more valuable it is.
I love that. Yes, the hidden but functional kind
Yeah,
of aspect of the
and
petticoat.
yeah, you might not see them, but they are an important integral part of the whole piece, because they were the process, or they initiated the process of the work, and then the final work. So they have, from in my mind, they have a lot more character than a piece that doesn't have any layers. The piece with hardly any layers might look good, but the ones that have bloody well 10 layers of paint and paper are more valuable to me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And I just want to bring up from Bethany, who's loving seeing you here today. So
thank you,
great.
Bethany.
Thanks, Bethany.
Yes.
Okay, so let me see. So I kind of read that you live in the two places, Florida and West Virginia, and that the different climates influence your eye. So, and obviously affect your work. So over the years, as the climates have changed and the weather has altered, has that influenced your work as well? Or is it more just about the two separate places and the division of the two places, rather than the actual weather? Or how do the two places inform your work?
Yeah, I'm not quite understanding, but I can discuss it. I think I mentioned to you that I generally say no, it doesn't influence my work, because my design work is basically the same no matter where I'm working. But the light is a tremendous factor in Florida.
Right.
So, I'd almost have to stand the finished products side by side and see if I can tell the difference. But the working conditions are very different, even though I have the same canvases, the same paper for collage, the same paint. The light and the setting and just the atmosphere is very, very different, because I work in my basement in West Virginia.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of questions, so I'll skip to that because I don't want to run out of time without asking the questions. So from Julie, what type of fabric remnants or material do you collect and incorporate into your collages?
I don't. First of all, I don't use fabric anymore. I have throughout the years I've been getting rid of my fabric. I've kept a few, like some silks that I thought I might use. I don't put any mementos like letters. I used to put a lot of photography, and you have some on my quilts, some photography that I've put into my quilts. And I don't know if I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And this was kind of relating on to that. So you said that you don't use fabric anymore.
No.
So do you use stitch with the paper, or?
I do. I do stitch. I do actually. I still honor the stitch, but not all of my papers show that. And I've also started a stitch with a sewing machine that doesn't have any thread, so it acts as a hole punch.
Right. Yes.
And when the ink or the paint is drawn across that perforation, it takes the ink differently, and it's nice. I like that.
Oh. Now, Laurie would like to see some more of your images, which of course that is an excellent point. Thanks, Laurie. So we'll bring up some images, and perhaps we can just, you can sort of talk to those. So
glad to.
Let me sort that out now. Going to those images. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what order they are in terms of your chronological art practice, but perhaps you can tell us a little bit about them as we go.
I can speak about this one. The image that is at the top, a third of the way down the piece, sort of represents a fish. In the early 90s and maybe mid 90s, the late 90s, I was interested in fishing, and I spent a lot of time on a lake in Central Florida. So that's where the wood structure came from, the pier. I did not put that image on the fabric. I actually took it to a print shop, and I brought them obviously the image and the fabric, but they bonded it as in a laser process. And I don't think they did do that anymore. I see some netting. I also worked in silk screen at this time. And I did make the silk screens from my own photography. I'd like to speak about an artist who influenced me greatly, Robert Rauschenberg.
Yes.
So I sort of, I hopefully wasn't trying to copy him, because this is not Robert Rauschenberg, but photography did play a part in my work at this time. So, and
I'll go on.
What?
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say I could move through some other ones, but as I said, I'm not quite sure the order that they go in terms of.
I actually have this hanging in my home in West Virginia. So
gorgeous.
You're not supposed to say who your favorite child is. But I think this is my favorite quilt, and it just came about very, very oddly. I printed a whole bunch of white cotton duck, and this was done with fabric paints. I don't know if any of the guests today remember Deca paint, Deca fabric paint, right? So that, and I was just playing with splashing the paint on these different pieces of fabric, and using an instrument to take some of it off. And then I started to construct the piece. That's basically how it came about. I think I put a piece of sheeting on a wall and started adding cutting fabric and adding it to it. So it's pretty crude in the way it's stitched together.
And in the top left corner, in that sort of square, those marks there in that, how is that something, is those marks made by a stitch or?
No, by me rubbing an instrument, like maybe it could have. I don't know what it was that I don't remember. It could have been just I don't know, a pencil or something.
And then we have this one.
Yeah, that's some of my photography on fabric.
And so is that the process of putting the photography like through another source, or are you using a laser printer, inkjet printer, to put that on the fabric? Or
I'm pretty sure I was depending on the printer to put those onto cotton duck. Now I did reproduce some of my photography to a silk screen. I had quite a few different silk screens that I used periodically. Yeah.
And this is more from the art quilt series.
Yes. Another Rauschenberg lookalike. That was a lot of photography, and I guess the same methods that I used on the one that I called my favorite. When I was pulling across to get the lines.
And then I think we've got these ones here from your
these are
recent
these
show.
are recent, but I included this because it's so quilt-like, and I was surprised how comfortable it was for me to go back into a quilt-like. It seems as if it's pieced, and that's not not the way I've been working. So
And this,
yeah, that's
this
very
box,
cool.
yeah.
That one, the one that you just showed.
Yes, the kitchen sink.
Kitchen sink, and then the next one you had up, the last one. Yeah, that's only about 2 months old.
Great. Okay.
And that's a jelly print on the top corner.
Wow. Yes. Seamlessly blended and incorporated there too.
That's the beauty of paper.
And okay, so that's, I'll just call up this other one here from a recent one.
Yes, various papers, and that's correct. Oh,
that's quite different.
Yeah, I want to talk about this because this is the earliest work that I gave you. I actually have this in my home here. It's only about maybe 20 by 20, and I presented it at an art festival in the late 1970s, maybe early 80s. But it's so you can figure it out, I'm sure. I mean, I made a pattern I drew a pattern on paper and then duplicated it so that I could cut it apart and have all these itty bitty little pieces. And of course, this is before I started painting fabric, and so these are all commercial fabrics.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that looks like there's it's very, very structured, very organized.
Very structured. There's a lot of silk, and that's when I was collecting fabric, and it was taking over my life.
And recently in the masterclass group that Fibre Arts Tech 2 had, the students were exploring with Donna Watson different design elements and principles, and which were more dominant in their work. So you have a very beautiful balance between geometric division of space and organic mark making. Do you consider yourself more organic or structured, and how do you balance the strong geometric shapes with the more organic?
I still fight it. I still fight it, but I prefer a balance between the two, and I don't know what the importance is of either one of those. I believe it's a personal decision. For me, I would like to see more movement than geometric structure, but I think the structure acts as a skeleton in a work. So I mean, both of them.
Yeah,
it's a personal choice. It's obviously a personal choice. So we have a lot of movement going on there. Yeah.
Yes, and also the geometric shapes too, and yeah, that's best of both worlds happening in that one. And this is one of your recent ones.
Yes, and that's a recent one. That's a monoprint that's down below. That piece has had many, many, many lives. And finally, I got to a stage that I don't know, something takes over. I'm sure you've experienced this, Tara. And that's when you head to your collage bin to figure it out. So those orange piece, those big strong squares at the bottom are prints from the Golden Open on a plexi plate.
Oh, good. Yes, I was going to ask that. And yes, you say bin, I say treasure trove.
I could use that. I'll try to switch.
So, oh, that's right. I was going to ask you about Your website asks viewers to openly respond and interpret your work. Do you find that people need to make sense of abstract, or do you think people respond to the title or the actual work itself,
Well,
or both?
that's a fun question. That's just fun. We've all had those kind of experiences. I know people in my life that need to see something, and I try to discourage them if they're in my presence. I ask them, to hold it down, because it's a little distracting, because I see it's in its entirety as um, it's an expression of art, and it for me, it doesn't require any understanding other than what it feels like to the person that's looking at it. I generally don't. Occasionally, I have seen an object in my piece, and I try to ignore it. Well, now there was something else you asked me at the end. What was that?
Do people have to respond to the title first, or the work itself, or
Okay.
make sense
I
of
know.
everything?
I basically think people respond to the work rather than title.
Right. Yes. And we're just going to jump to a question from Marilyn. She would like to know how you frame your pieces, or
Hi,
if you
Marilyn.
frame them.
I don't frame them.
That's the answer to that. Yes, good.
Maybe she wants to know. I'm sorry, about the canvas, the stretch canvas, because that would be the only.
Sorry, I jumped to another question.
I know. Let's go back to that, because that was not correct. The stretch canvas I do not frame. Occasionally, if I want to show that the work that's on paper, on watercolor paper, I have a professional framer do it for me, and they would be in a shadow box where there would be space, so that the piece of paper can move, or just have its natural shape within the box. Sorry, I did that.
That's okay. In your notes for today, you described art as being your best friend.
Yes.
And I wanted to know, do you ever have fights or fall out with your best friend?
All the time, right? it's usually a power struggle.
And then, how do you make up with them, or how do you reconnect, or how do you nurture the friendship with your best friend? I know Julia Cameron has that thing about the artist date. Do you take yourself on an artist date, or
artist estate? Did you say?
Sorry, artist date.
Date.
Yes.
Well, every time that I make marks or washes or anything, I guess I'm on an artist date. No, yeah. I refer to it as my best friend, is because it's always there, and it's I always enjoy it. I mean, it can be frustrating, of course, but it's a power struggle in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. And who wins? Oh, it's not about the winning.
Well, we can always cut them up, can't we? The canvases and destroy them.
And I was also reading that you love new discoveries. Do you recall what your latest discovery was? Was it a material or a process, or is there something that comes to mind as a latest discovery?
Recently, because I'm in the printing phase right now with materials, I'm not painting the canvases, so I'm making what I call making parts, and that is printing on the paper to put in my treasure box. What was the question again? I get.
Oh no, just a latest discovery.
Yes. I was leading to that. With the jelly plate. That's my latest discovery. I'm using a squeegee to get get interesting shapes. And
Oh,
you
yes.
know, I think that's what's so fascinating with the jelly plate, because there's a high amount of frustration with it, and then all of a sudden there's this
Yes.
gorgeous, wonderful, wonderful gem that comes out of it, maybe about the 50th try. Um, that's rather remarkable. It's in the realm of magic, because it's hard to control the jelly plate.
Mm, mm. And so, in terms of artists that inspire you, you touched on Rauschenberg, and when we were chatting earlier in the week, you mentioned the abstract expressionists. And
Yes.
I was kind of, when we look at inspiration, how does this manifest? Is it something that is it a feeling that you get that inspires you to then do your own thing, or is it something that you can use when you look at their work for inspiration?
Hmm.
Being inspired, what does that mean to you?
Well, of course, that means that I like it tremendously. And I could list a few that have had a big influence on me. Um, uh, I don't copy. I mean, that would be no fun. In fact, it would be impossible. I can't copy myself, so I can't imagine copying
Yes.
somebody else. Um, but it's sort of like the images in nature. You pull it into your brain, and it comes back out in a form that you created. So I'm not sure where I went with that question.
Yeah.
You can help me.
No, that's okay. It's interesting with there's so many things coming at us all the time,
Mhm.
even if we are just, in a lockdown, or just, cruising through our,
Mhm.
online sort of, it's difficult, isn't it, to not be influenced by so many other things. But then also when you do see great ideas, you kind of go, oh, how can I use that? Or when I was at a gallery the other day, I think a lot of it is just that feeling of being in that space and being surrounded by other people's great ideas that just feels very sort of nurturing, really.
Right. I am always looking at other people's artwork. Always, always. I mean, that is that's one of the most relaxing activities that I can think of. Um, looking, just looking online, and then finding a name of an artist and pursuing it, and to see what else they've accomplished. Um, what I I don't know how to do, and I have to do this through self-discovery, is how do some artists make these most wonderful washes that are just magnificent, and the way that they combine colors. So I, I took that away.
Yeah, yeah.
It just took away.
And someone here would like to know an
Okay.
example of of that.
I
I
have,
can.
I gave you an image of my studio in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh,
Can you
yes,
find
Studio
that?
for Audio. Okay, let's do that.
Okay. Alrighty. So, uh, to about the middle of this image, there's a jelly plate print. Oh, and actually above it, there's a jelly plate print too. But the one that's sort
So,
of
are we looking at the one with the red, or in the
oh,
top
you know what?
left there? Or
The one in the red is a jelly plate, but then to the right, towards the end of the wall, close to the glass
Mhm.
doors,
Oh,
is a
yes.
jelly plate in grays and in blacks, and the one that's a horizontal piece of paper above it is a jelly
Mhm.
print too.
And so the plate that you use there, is that one of the larger size ones,
Yes, it
or?
is. It is. Yes,
Yeah.
and that's some paper that is from China. It's available in the United States now. Because I've just discovered it, and it's very cheap. I couldn't offhand give you the name of it, but If you're doing printing like I do printing, and there are so many oops that are really not even usable, it's good to have cheap paper.
Yes, we've got a close-up here too from a
Oh
workshop.
yeah, that's a workshop.
That looks interesting. Is that some fabric placed on top there, like a
Oh,
muslin
you know,
fabric?
that was this was about 10 years ago, when that's an example of the gessoed cotton duck to the scrim, I call it.
Oh, yes.
So this is the beginning of a flexible, rigid thing that looks like a quilt, but it would never be able to be in a competition as a quilt,
Right.
at least from my perspective.
So all the base, so I see, yes, you can see the frayed edges at the bottom. So it did look like paper to begin with, but it's actually, as you said, cotton duck there.
Yes.
Yeah. Oops.
That's recent.
And that's,
Yeah, that's recent. That's a jelly plate at the right, and just some crazy lines and shapes of acrylic paint on an acrylic sheet, a large sheet, and it's a monoprint.
great. So can you believe we're nearly at the end of our time
I can't
together?
believe it. I can't believe
I know,
it.
just chatting time
We
flies.
need to talk more.
So I was wondering, what are you looking forward to this year? What do you have? Do you have plans coming up creatively for the next few months at all?
No, I don't. I don't have a show. I had one. I had one last year that was wonderful because I was able to work toward the show during lockdown.
Yes,
So
nothing like a focus.
it was great. I was telling my friends that I was made for this. That you know, my
Introvert living.
stars. What?
Introvert living at its best.
Yes. No, I will. I'm continuing to work, and I didn't mention that I do oil too, mostly acrylic, but I do work in oil as well.
And do you have workshops coming up for this year? Laurie would like to know. I presume Laurie is in the States.
I do in New York, Hudson River Valley workshop in Greenville, New York.
Excellent. Well, it's been wonderful, and I've loved this opportunity to chat to you and hear more about your practice this morning. So thank you so much. We've got a lot of people listening with us today, and thank you also much to everyone who has joined us from all over the globe. We really appreciate it. I'll pop your comments up as we exit this talk today. So yes, everyone, if you'd like to leave your thanks and comments to Fran, that'd be fantastic. It's been great. So Fran, just stay there for a little bit longer and we'll play a slideshow. Oh, she says, going to the controls. And it's been fabulous, and thank you so much. And everyone, have a happy nearly weekend.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Exit now. Thank you.